Zara's crystalline fingers traced the edges of the wedding invitation one more time, her pale blue skin shimmering with nervous energy. The Altarian nobility had been buzzing about her engagement for months, and not in a good way. She was marrying beneath her station, they whispered. A human. A quiet, unremarkable human who worked as a translator in the diplomatic corps. Marcus Chun sat across from her in her modest apartment, reviewing documents with the same methodical precision he brought to everything. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he worked, and she found herself studying his profile for the 1000th time. There was something about the way he carried himself that had first caught her attention at the embassy reception 2 years ago. While other species postured and displayed their strength, Marcus simply observed. He spoke when spoken to, smiled politely, and somehow commanded respect without demanding it. The Valerian delegation is concerned about the security arrangements, Marcus said, looking up from his tablet. His voice carried that same calm tone that had initially frustrated and then fascinated her. Ambassador Thek thinks there might be trouble. Zara's antennae twitched with anxiety. The Valorians were a warrior race, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with thick, armored hide and claws that could rend steel. Their concerns about security usually meant someone was planning violence. What kind of trouble? The usual kind. Marcus set down his tablet and reached across the table to take her hand. His skin was warm against her cool touch, one of the many small differences between their species that had become precious to her. Some of the great houses are still upset about our marriage. They see it as weakness, contamination of the bloodline. She squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses on his fingers from his hobby of ancient Earth sword-making. It was such an odd pastime for a diplomat, crafting replicas of weapons from humanity's violent past. He'd shown her his collection once, explaining the history behind each design with the same quiet passion he brought to his translation work. Samurai swords, European longswords, curved sabers from a dozen different cultures. All perfectly balanced, all sharp enough to cut paper with a whisper. Maybe we should postpone, she said, though the words tasted bitter. Until things calmed down. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with those dark eyes that seemed to see everything. Then he smiled, just a slight curve of his lips. Zara, I've spent 3 years learning your customs, your language, your poetry. I've memorized every detail of Altarian wedding traditions down to the specific angle of the ceremonial crystal arrangements. Do you really think I'm going to let a bunch of crystalline aristocrats scare me away now? There was again that understated confidence that had drawn her to him. While other suitors had tried to impress her with displays of wealth or strength, Marcus had simply made her laugh. He'd learned to cook Altarian cuisine, studied her people's history, and listened to her ramble about stellar cartography with genuine interest. He was the most peaceful person she'd ever met, which made his weapon-crafting hobby all the more puzzling. The Valerian delegation isn't just concerned about protests, she said carefully. Ambassador Thek mentioned weapons. Hired mercenaries. The House of Crystalline Peaks has deep coffers, and they've never forgiven me for refusing their heir. Marcus nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful rather than worried. How many mercenaries are we talking about? Does it matter? Marcus, these aren't street thugs. The nobility can afford to hire Corvin death squads, Zethri assassins, even draconic shock troops if they're desperate enough. She could feel her voice rising with panic. You're a translator. You speak 17 languages and can mediate trade disputes, but you're not a fighter. Something flickered across Marcus's face too quickly for her to identify. No, he said quietly. I'm not a fighter. The wedding was set for 3 days hence, in the grand crystal cathedral that had hosted Altarian royal ceremonies for 1,000 years. Representatives from 47 species would attend, along with the cream of Altarian society. It should have been the happiest day of her life. Instead, Zara found herself wondering if it would be their last. That night, she lay awake listening to Marcus breathe beside her. His sleep was peaceful, untroubled by the threats that kept her mind racing. Sometimes she envied humans their emotional stability. While her people felt everything with crystal clarity, humans seemed to possess an inner calm that she couldn't fathom. It was probably what made Marcus such an effective diplomat. She turned to study his sleeping face in the dim starlight filtering through their window. Tomorrow, the security briefings would begin. Tomorrow, They would learn exactly what they were facing. Tomorrow, everything would change. The security briefing took place in the embassy's shielded conference room, its walls humming with anti-surveillance frequencies. Commander Vyrix of the Valerian Guard stood at attention beside a holographic display showing the cathedral's layout. His massive frame made even the spacious room feel cramped, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the artificial lights. Intelligence reports confirm at least 3 separate contracts have been issued. Vyrix rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. Corvin infiltrators, Zethary shadow dancers, and, most concerning, a pack of Fenrisian berserkers. The total bounty for disrupting the wedding exceeds the annual GDP of most colonies. Marcus sat quietly beside Zora, making notes on his tablet with the same methodical care he brought to his translation work. He asked no questions, offered no suggestions, just absorbed the information with that peculiar human stillness she'd grown to love. Ambassador Thek, an elderly Valerian with scars from the border wars, watched Marcus with something that might have been concern. "Mr. Chun," Thek said carefully, "perhaps you should consider remaining in the embassy during the ceremony. We could arrange for a secure connection so you could participate remotely." Marcus looked up from his notes, his expression politely puzzled. "Is that what you'd recommend to a Valerian groom facing threats?" Vyrix's mandibles clicked with what Zara had learned to recognize as amusement. A Valerian groom would be expected to fight beside his warriors. "Then, I'll fight beside mine," Marcus said simply, returning to his notes. The room fell silent. Zara felt a chill run through her crystalline structure. "Marcus, you don't understand. These aren't diplomatic negotiations. These are killers. Professional killers who specialize in eliminating targets during public ceremonies." "I understand perfectly." Marcus set down his stylus and looked around the table. "The question is, do you understand me?" There was something in his voice, a subtle change in timbre, that made Vyrix's head tilt slightly. The Valerian commander was a veteran of countless battles, his instincts honed by decades of warfare. If he was reacting to something in Marcus's tone, then Zara had missed it entirely. "With respect, Mr. Chun," Ambassador Thek interjected, "humans are not known for their combat prowess. Your species excels at diplomacy, trade, cultural adaptation, but warfare has never been your strength." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes moving from face to face around the table. When he spoke, his voice carried that same calm tone he used when explaining complex treaty provisions. "Ambassador, how many wars has humanity fought in the past 1,000 years?" Thek's scarred features creased in thought. "Internal conflicts? Dozens, I believe. But those were primitive affairs before your species achieved spaceflight. And since joining the Galactic Council?" "None," Vyrix answered, his deep voice thoughtful. "Humans have been exemplary peacekeepers. Your diplomatic corps has prevented more conflicts than any other species." Marcus nodded slowly. "And why do you think that is?" Zara found herself leaning forward, suddenly, intensely curious about her fiancé's point. In all their conversations about human history, Marcus had always focused on the cultural achievements, the art and literature and scientific breakthroughs. He'd mentioned the wars only in passing, treating them as unfortunate necessities that had led to better things. "Because you learned the value of peace," she said, though the words felt incomplete even as she spoke them. "No," Marcus said quietly, "because we learned the cost of war." He stood and walked to the holographic display, studying the cathedral's layout with new intensity. His fingers traced possible approach routes, choke points, lines of sight. It was the same methodical analysis he brought to trade agreements, but applied to something far deadlier. "The Corvin infiltrators will try to breach the security perimeter during the processional," he said, his voice taking on a clinical tone that was somehow more unsettling than anger would have been. "They're ambush predators, built for striking from concealment. The Zethary will wait for the ceremony itself, when all attention is focused on the altar. They prefer psychological warfare, making the kill when it will cause maximum terror." Vyrix leaned forward, his massive hands clasped before him. "And the Fenrisian berserkers?" Marcus turned from the display, and Zara saw something in his eyes she'd never noticed before. It wasn't anger or fear or even determination. It was a kind of cold calculation that made her crystalline skin shiver. "The Fenrisians will come straight through the front door," he said. They don't believe in subtlety. They'll charge the altar during the vows, expecting their reputation and natural advantages to carry the day. Natural advantages? Feck asked. Size, strength, natural weaponry, pack hunting instincts. Marcus listed off. Against most species, it would be enough. They're used to their enemies running or dying quickly. But not against humans? Vyrex's question carried genuine curiosity. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. Humans don't run, he said finally. We learned a long time ago that running just means you die tired. That evening, Zara found Marcus in his workshop, a converted storage room in their apartment building's basement. She'd only been here a few times before, usually when he was putting finishing touches on one of his historical replicas. Tonight, he wasn't working on replicas. The weapon on his workbench was unlike anything in his collection. The blade was a dark, almost black metal that seemed to drink in the light. Its edge was so sharp it appeared to cut the air itself. The handle was wrapped in some kind of core that looked worn smooth by use, not craftsmanship. What is that? She whispered. Marcus didn't look up from his work, making minute adjustments to the weapon's balance with precision instruments. Something I hoped I'd never need again. Now he did look at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, Marcus Chun looked genuinely sad. Zara, there are things about human history that we don't talk about in polite company. Things we're not proud of. Things that made us very, very good at killing each other. She moved closer, her crystalline form reflecting fragments of the workshop's harsh lighting. I don't understand. You will, he said quietly, testing the weapon's edge with a piece of silk. The fabric parted without resistance, the two pieces floating to the floor like dying butterflies. Tomorrow you'll understand exactly what kind of species you're marrying into. The crystal cathedral of Altair, Prime, rose like a frozen symphony against the morning sky, its faceted walls catching and splitting sunlight into rainbow cascades. Zara stood before the massive mirrors in her preparation chamber, her ceremonial robes flowing around her like captured starlight. The traditional Altarian wedding dress incorporated thousands of tiny crystals, each one representing a blessing from her ancestors. Today, they felt more like armor. The security sweeps are complete, her sister Lyra reported, her blue skin slightly darker with worry. Commander Vyrex's teams have checked every possible hiding spot, installed additional sensors, and positioned guards at all access points. If anything moves wrong, they'll know about it. Zara nodded, trying to calm the nervous energy that made her crystalline structure hum with subsonic frequencies. Through the chamber's windows, she could see the guests beginning to arrive. Diplomatic shuttles from a dozen species descended toward the cathedral's landing platforms, their hulls gleaming in the alien sunlight. Representatives from the Galactic Council, Trade Federation leaders, nobility from across the sector. And, somewhere among them, killers who had traveled across the galaxy for the chance to spill blood on her wedding day. Where's Marcus? She asked. Still in the embassy, according to the security feeds, Lyra replied. He's been in conference with Commander Vyrex for the past hour. Some kind of tactical briefing. The thought of her gentle fiancé discussing tactical anything sent another wave of dissonance through Zara's form. She'd known Marcus for 3 years, lived with him for 1, and she was beginning to suspect she didn't know him at all. The man who made her tea every morning and listened to her recite ancient poetry was the same one who had spoken of humanity's capacity for violence with such cold precision. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Zara's personal communicator displayed Ambassador Feck's weathered face, his expression grim. Lady Zara, I'm afraid we have a development. Our intelligence network has identified the specific mercenary units targeting your wedding. The numbers are concerning. How concerning? Zara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. 12 Corvin infiltrators, led by a pack leader called Shadow Fawn. 8 Zethri dancers from the Crimson Veil Syndicate. And 6 Fenrisian berserkers under the command of someone called Bloodhowl. Feck paused, his scarred features troubled. Lady Zara, these aren't ordinary criminals. These are some of the most dangerous beings in known space. Even our Valerian Guard contingent would struggle against such numbers. Zara sank into a crystalline chair, her wedding dress pooling around her like liquid light. Then, we cancel the ceremony. Send everyone home. Wait until no. Marcus's voice came from the doorway, and Zara looked up to see him entering her preparation chamber. He wore the formal diplomatic uniform of Earth's embassy, dark blue with silver trim. But something about the way he moved had changed. His steps were silent, economical, and his eyes held that same cold calculation she'd seen the night before. "Marcus, you heard the numbers," she said, rising to face him. 26 professional killers. This isn't about pride anymore, it's about survival. "You're right," he said quietly. "It is about survival. The survival of our marriage, our future, and everything we're trying to build together." He moved to the window, gazing out at the gathering crowd below. "If we run now, they'll never let us have peace. There will always be another threat, another contract, another reason why a human and an Altarian can't be together." Lyra stepped forward, her crystalline features sharp with worry. "Marcus, with all respect, you're one person. One diplomat against 26 killers. The mathematics of this situation, the mathematics," Marcus interrupted, "assume that all combatants are equal. That's rarely true in actual warfare." He turned from the window, and Zara saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. It wasn't fear or determination or even anger. It was a kind of professional focus that belonged on the face of someone very different from the gentleman she thought she'd known. "In 30 minutes, you're going to walk down that aisle," Marcus said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "You're going to speak the vows we've practiced, exchange the ritual crystals, and become my wife. And anyone who tries to stop that is going to learn why humanity spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing." Ambassador Thek's image flickered with static as his concern spiked. "Mr. Chun, perhaps you should know that the mercenaries aren't planning to simply disrupt the ceremony. The contracts specify your death and Lady Zara's capture. They intend to make an example that will discourage other interspecies unions." Marcus nodded as if Thek had just informed him about a scheduling change. "Then, they'll have to get through me first." "Marcus," Zara whispered, moving to take his hands. His skin felt warm and steady, unchanged despite everything happening around them. "I love you, but you're not a warrior. You're a translator, a diplomat. You solve problems with words, not violence." He smiled then, the same gentle expression she'd fallen in love with, and for a moment he was just Marcus again. "Zara, do you know why humanity developed so many languages?" The question seemed to come from nowhere, but she'd learned to trust his tangential thinking. "Trade? Cultural exchange? Warfare," he said simply. "Every human language evolved in isolation because every human tribe needed to communicate in ways their enemies couldn't understand. We developed 17 different words for types of ambush because we needed them. We created poetry about battle because we lived battle. For 10,000 years, every human child grew up learning that the universe was full of things that wanted to kill them, and that survival meant being better at killing back." Zara stared at him. Pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed beginning to fall into place. The diplomatic corps, the peacekeeping, the cultural adaptability. All warfare skills, Marcus confirmed. "We learned to read body language because missing a threat meant death. We learned to adapt to other cultures because understanding your enemy meant victory. We became diplomats because we got tired of burying our children." Through the chamber's crystal walls, Zara could see the last of the wedding guests taking their seats. The ceremony would begin soon, and, with it, the deadliest celebration in Altarian history. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Marcus squeezed her hands gently. "Trust me," he said, "and when the time comes, don't look away." The Crystal Cathedral's main hall sparkled with the light of 1,000 suns, its faceted walls creating a kaleidoscope of color that danced across the assembled guests. Representatives from 47 different species filled the crystalline pews, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. Zara walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her heart hammering against her chest in rhythms that made her crystalline structure sing with harmonic frequencies. Marcus waited at the altar, his hands clasped behind his back, expression serene. To anyone watching, he appeared to be a nervous groom trying to project calm confidence. Zara had learned to read the subtle signs that others missed, and what she saw made her breath catch. His stillness wasn't nervous energy contained, it was predatory patience. His eyes swept the crowd with methodical precision, cataloging faces, positions, escape routes. The officiant, High Priest Corvin, began the ancient words in Old Altarian, his voice resonating through the cathedral's natural acoustics. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly, each ritual element performed with precision. The blessing of the four winds, the exchange of family crystals, the recitation of lineages stretching back 3,000 years. To any observer, it was a perfect Altarian wedding, combining tradition with diplomatic necessity. Zara felt the first tremor of wrong through her crystalline perception just as they reached the vow exchange. It was subtle, a disturbance in the cathedral's harmonic resonance that suggested something heavy moving through the walls themselves. The Corvin infiltrators, just as Marcus had predicted. They were using the cathedral's own crystal structure as a pathway, moving through maintenance shafts that most species couldn't navigate. Marcus's voice never wavered as he spoke his vows, the words flowing in perfect high Altarian despite the growing tension in the air. I pledge my life to yours, my strength to your protection, my love to your happiness, until the stars burn cold and the universe grows dark. That was when the lights went out. Emergency illumination activated immediately, casting everything in harsh red shadows that transformed the beautiful cathedral into something from a nightmare. Screams erupted from the crowd as massive forms crashed through the stained glass windows. The Fenrisian berserkers had arrived, their pack leader Bloodhowl releasing a roar that shattered crystal fixtures and sent razor-sharp fragments raining down on the guests. Bloodhowl stood nearly 10 feet tall, his lupin form covered in ritual scars and battle-worn armor. His pack spread out behind him, smaller but no less terrifying, their claws gleaming in the emergency lights. These were creatures bred for war, raised on violence, who had never encountered prey that didn't flee or die quickly. By order of the great houses of Altair, this unholy union is ended. Bloodhowl's voice carried the authority of absolute violence. The human dies, the female comes with us. The Valerian guards moved to intercede, their massive forms imposing even against Fenrisian berserkers. But Commander Vyrix held up a hand, stopping his warriors in their tracks. His scarred features wore an expression of grim anticipation as he watched the altar. Marcus stepped in front of Zara, his movement fluid and economical. When he spoke, his voice carried the same calm tone he used for diplomatic translations, but now it held undertones that made even the berserkers pause. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, his hands still clasped behind his back, "I'm afraid you're interrupting my wedding. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Bloodhowl's laugh was like breaking glass and grinding stone. "Little human, do you know what we are? I have killed things your entire species couldn't imagine. My claws have opened the throats of draconic warriors. My teeth have tasted the blood of Valerian champions." "Impressive," Marcus replied conversationally. "Have you ever killed a human?" The question seemed to genuinely puzzle the berserker. "Humans die like all prey, quickly and with much screaming." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I see the problem. You've never actually fought a human, have you? You've killed human civilians, human merchants, human diplomats, people who were never meant to fight." His hands moved from behind his back, and Zara saw the dark blade he'd been working on the night before. It seemed to drink the emergency lighting, creating a void in the air that hurt to look at directly. "You see," Marcus continued, his voice taking on the cadence of a lecture, "humans aren't naturally strong like Valorians. We don't have claws like Fenrisians or natural armor like Corvins. We're persistence hunters from a death world, and we learned a very important lesson during our evolution." Bloodhowl snarled, flexing claws that could rend steel. "What lesson, little prey?" Marcus raised the blade, and suddenly his entire posture changed. The mild-mannered diplomat vanished, replaced by something that had walked out of humanity's darkest dreams. His stance was perfect, balanced, economical. His grip on the weapon spoke of decades of training, muscle memory carved into bone, and sinew through endless repetition. "We learned," Marcus said quietly, "that anything can be killed if you're creative enough." Bloodhowl charged with the full fury of a Fenrisian berserker, claws extended, mouth opened in a battle roar that had broken the spirits of countless enemies. He moved with the speed and power that had made his species the most feared close combat fighters in 3 sectors. Marcus moved like water, like shadow, like death itself. The dark blade whispered through the air in an arc so perfect it seemed to bend reality around its edge. There was no clash of weapons, no dramatic exchange of blows. One moment Bloodhowl was charging with unstoppable fury. The next he was falling in two separate pieces, his expression still locked in surprised rage. The cathedral fell silent except for the sound of Marcus's blade being cleaned and sheathed in one smooth motion. The other berserkers stared in shock at their fallen leader, their pack instincts struggling to process the impossible sight before them. "Now," Marcus said, his voice returning to diplomatic calm, "would anyone else like to interrupt my wedding?" That was when the real attack began. Shadows moved in the rafters as Zethary dancers descended on nearly invisible lines. Walls exploded inward as Corvin infiltrators burst from their hiding places. The cathedral erupted into chaos as 25 of the galaxy's deadliest killers converged on a single human standing at the altar. Marcus drew his sword again, and Zara finally understood what she had married. Not a gentle diplomat who happened to collect antique weapons, but something far more dangerous. Something that had learned to wear the mask of civilization so well that even those closest to him forgot what lurked beneath. The dance of death that followed would be remembered in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. Not as a battle, but as a masterclass in what humans called applied violence. Marcus moved through the attacking mercenaries like a force of nature, his blade finding the weak points in armor, the gaps in natural defenses, the split-second vulnerabilities that existed in every living thing. He didn't fight like other species fought, with strength or speed or natural weapons. He fought like humanity had always fought, with intelligence and creativity and the absolute refusal to surrender. Every move was precise, economical, designed to end threats with minimum effort and maximum effect. When the last assassin fell, Marcus stood among the carnage with barely a mark on his diplomatic uniform. He cleaned his blade again, sheathed it, and turned back to the altar where Zara waited, her crystalline form shimmering with awe and terror. "Now," he said, offering her his hand with the same gentle smile she'd fallen in love with. "Where were we?" The silence that followed the battle was profound, broken only by the soft tinkling of crystal fragments settling to the cathedral floor. Zara stared at the man she was about to marry, her crystalline perception struggling to reconcile the gentle diplomat with the lethal force she had just witnessed. Marcus stood calmly at the altar, his dark blade sheathed, his diplomatic uniform barely disturbed despite having just dismantled 26 of the galaxy's most dangerous killers. High Priest Corvin, who had taken shelter behind the altar during the violence, slowly emerged with his ceremonial robes intact but his dignity thoroughly shaken. "Perhaps," he said in a voice that trembled only slightly, "we should complete the ceremony." The assembled guests sat in stunned silence, representatives from dozens of species trying to process what they had just witnessed. Ambassador Thek's scarred features showed something that might have been professional appreciation. Commander Vyrix and his Valerian guards stood at attention, their massive forms radiating a respect that had been earned rather than given. Marcus took Zara's hands in his, and she was amazed to find them steady, warm, unchanged from the morning's preparations. "I know this changes things," he said quietly, his voice carrying only to her through the cathedral's acoustics. "I know this isn't what you thought you were marrying." Zara looked into his eyes, those same dark eyes that had first captivated her at the embassy reception. Behind them, she could see layers she had never suspected. The gentle man who made her tea and listened to her poetry was real, but he coexisted with something far more dangerous. A weapon that had learned to wear the mask of civilization so perfectly that even she had been fooled. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Since I was 6, Marcus replied without asking for clarification. "Standard human military training. We all receive it just in case. Most of us never need to use it. But you've used it before." His expression grew distant, memories flickering behind his eyes like shadows. "Twice. Border skirmishes before I joined the diplomatic corps. That's why I became a translator, actually. I got tired of the killing." Zara felt the pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. The careful way Marcus moved through crowds, always knowing where the exits were. His hobby of weapon crafting that had seemed so incongruous with his peaceful nature. The way he could read people's intentions with uncanny accuracy. All warrior skills, honed to perfection and hidden behind a facade of diplomatic courtesy. The other species, she said, understanding flooding through her crystalline structure. They don't know, do they? About what humans really are. Marcus shook his head slightly. We learned early that it's better to be underestimated. Humans aren't the strongest or fastest or toughest species in the galaxy, so we became something else. We became the species that other species trusted, that they turned to for mediation and diplomacy. And we never, ever let them see the weapons we carry. High Priest Corvin cleared his throat delicately. Perhaps the happy couple could complete their vows? The cathedral's structural integrity may not survive another interruption. Marcus squeezed Zara's hands gently. What do you want to do? I'll understand if you need time to process this. If you want to postpone, or reconsider, or shut up, Zara said, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. Marcus Chun, I have watched you spend 3 years learning my language, my customs, my culture's most obscure traditions. I have watched you make friends with beings who tower over you, negotiate treaties with species that could crush you without effort, and win the respect of warriors and diplomats alike through nothing but intelligence and patience. Did you really think finding out you could also kill things would make me love you less? Relief flooded Marcus's features, and for a moment he was just her gentle fiancé again. I was hoping not, but you risked everything to protect our wedding, she continued, her crystalline structure humming with harmonic frequencies of deep emotion. You stood against impossible odds because you believed in what we're building together. If that's not love, I don't know what is. She turned to High Priest Corvin, her voice carrying clearly through the cathedral. Continue the ceremony. I'm ready to marry this human. The remainder of the wedding proceeded without incident, though Zara noted that several species representatives were taking detailed notes and speaking quietly into communication devices. Word of what had happened here would spread through diplomatic channels within hours. The galaxy's perception of humanity was about to undergo a dramatic revision. When they reached the final vows, Marcus spoke in perfect High Altarian, his voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral. I pledge to stand beside you in peace, to protect you in war, to love you in joy and sorrow, until the last star burns out and the universe grows cold. Zara responded with the traditional words, but her eyes never left his face. I accept your pledge and offer my own. Together we are stronger than either could be alone. Together we face whatever the universe may bring. High Priest Corvin raised the ceremonial crystal, its faceted surface catching and splitting the emergency lighting into rainbow patterns. By the authority of the great houses of Altair and the recognition of the Galactic Council, I pronounce you husband and wife. May your union bring light to dark places and peace to troubled times. The kiss that sealed their marriage was gentle, tender, completely at odds with the violence that had preceded it. But Zara could feel the strength in Marcus's arms, the controlled power that he kept carefully leashed beneath his diplomatic exterior. As they walked back down the aisle together, past the bodies of the mercenaries, and through the shattered crystal, applause began to build among the guests. Not the polite, diplomatic applause of political necessity, but genuine appreciation for what they had witnessed. Two beings from different worlds, different species, different ways of life, choosing to build something together despite all opposition. Ambassador Feck stepped forward as they reached the cathedral's entrance, his scarred features showing deep respect. Mr. Chun, Mrs. Chun, on behalf of the Galactic Council, may I say that this has been the most educational diplomatic event I have ever attended. Marcus inclined his head politely. Thank you, Ambassador. I hope it won't be necessary to provide similar demonstrations in the future. I suspect, Feck replied with something that might have been a smile, that word will spread quickly enough to prevent that. The galaxy has underestimated humanity for quite some time. That's unlikely to continue. As they walked toward their waiting transport, Zara leaned against her new husband's arm. So what happens now? Do we go back to our quiet life of translation work and diplomatic receptions? Marcus considered the question seriously. I imagine things will be different. Other species will look at humans differently now, knowing what we're capable of. There will be new challenges, new opportunities, new dangers. Are you worried? Marcus smiled, the same gentle expression that had first captured her heart. No, he said quietly. I'm not worried. After all, I'm married to the most brilliant stellar cartographer in 3 sectors. Together, we can navigate whatever comes next. Behind them, cleanup crews were already working to restore the Crystal Cathedral, removing the evidence of the day's violence while preserving the beauty that had made it a wonder of Altarian architecture. The wedding had ended, but the marriage was just beginning. And across the galaxy, in military academies and intelligence briefings and diplomatic conferences, beings were asking themselves a new question. If humanity had been hiding this capability all along, what else might they be capable of? The quiet humans, it seemed, had finally drawn their swords. The universe would never be the same.